This video is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as financial advice. Consult with a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all doing well. This is episode number 6 of my Dividend FastPass series, and today I'm asking the question, is CGDG the new king of dividend growth for 2026? Well, to find out, let's look at its overview and performance for 2025. And then I'll talk about how CGDG fits in my portfolio. And finally, I'll share some goals for 2026. Okay, so let's get into the overview and performance. CGDG has a global approach to dividend investing. And if we look at the region breakdown as of December of last year, you can see that it has a lot of exposure to US markets, but it also has quite a bit of exposure to European and Asian markets. Now, if we look at the sector weighting, its 3 biggest sectors include financials, industrials, and IT. Some of its single-digit weightings include energy and real estate, which is interesting because if you're looking for an ETF to complement SCHD, where SCHD has a big weighting in energy and no exposure to real estate, well, CGDG might fit in or fill in those gaps. Now, looking at its top equities from last year, you can see that some of its top holdings had a really good year. I mean, TSMC up 56% in just 1 year. And I think it recently had a pretty good earnings report, so it's up even more this year. Now, for those of you who are unhappy when SCHD booted Broadcom out of the portfolio, well, CGDG has Broadcom. And I think it's one of the reasons why I think this is an excellent pair for something like SCHD. Now, if we look at some other holdings, I've had some of these holdings in the past, but couldn't justify a really big portion of the portfolio. So CGDG gives me that chance to have some exposure to these funds through an ETF. And these holdings have also done pretty well. I mean, up 54% for Airbus and RTX 63%. I mean, looking at its top 10 holdings, already CGDG looks like a really strong fund. Now, let's look at its performance. In blue, SCHD, and again, this is for 2025. SCHD is blue, DGRO is orange, and CGDG is purple. And you can see that, I mean, there's a clear winner, up 25%, and even more if you bought, during the dip. Okay, so looking at capital appreciation, you can look at 2024 and 2025. SCHD has only had a 1% appreciation in the last 2 years, and I know it's had a couple of rough years, but looking at DGRO, it actually did a little bit better in the last 2 years, up 13%, whereas CGDG is up 21%. So that's almost double of DGRO and SCHD. Now, if you're curious how it did against VOIM and SPY, because I know some people, when they're looking at an ETF, they'll ask this question, does it keep up with SPY or does it beat it? And I can tell you, it has, at least for 2025. CGDG is in blue, up 25%, and VYM and SPY are about the same, around 19 to 20%. Okay, now if we look at some details for dividend yield, because I think if you're a dividend and growth investor, capital appreciation might not be the most important. I mean, it is important, but not the primary reason why you invest in some of these funds. So looking at SCHD, it has the highest yield, but also the highest payout ratio. DGRO has sort of the middle of the pack, but has the highest beta. And CGDG has the lowest yield, but also the highest dividend growth, the lowest payout ratio, and the lowest beta. So if some people are projecting 2026 might be a choppy year, maybe this might be a good year for CGDG. So looking at dividend growth, which is one of the biggest reasons why I'm into this fund, CGDG has done pretty well against SCHD and DGRO. I mean, SCHD, 5.4%. Normally, it's around, I think, a 7 to 8% CAGR, 5-year CAGR, 10-year CAGR. But the last 2 years have not been great years for SCHD. And DGRO, actually, this is below average at only 4.7%. But CGDG had almost 10% of dividend growth. So I think there's a lot of potential and promise for these funds. Now, what I like about CGDG that's a little bit different than funds like SCHD and DGRO is it's actively managed. And I think in a choppy year, something like what we might have this year, it's good to have portfolio managers who have a lot of experience in the market. I mean, when we look at these portfolio managers, combined, they have almost 100 years of total investment experience. So, unlike SCHD, where they have to wait to reconstitute to take out some funds or make a strategic pivot, um, CGDG doesn't have those kind of rules built into their system. So if they see something going wrong, maybe they can actually make a strategic pivot that's timely, which is good for investors because I think for SCHD, that's one of the things that people have knocked it down in the last 2 years. It's hard to change or make a pivot in a timely fashion. So is CGDG the new king of dividend growth? Yes or no? And my answer is, well, not yet. And the reason why is it hasn't been around for more than 5 years. And I think for those people who are saying SCHD is a bad fund, yeah, maybe 1 or 2 years. But if you're a long term investor, you really have to be in a 10 to 20 year kind of time frame. Now, CGDG just came out a couple of years ago and it came out in sort of a bull market. So it's hard to say that it's a dividend growth fund right now because it just hasn't have had a lot of history. Now, 2026 might be a good test to see how it performs in something like, with a lot of volatility, maybe a 20% correction in the markets and pretty choppy. So if CGDG can, perform reasonably well in 2026, I think that might be a good data point for, people who are interested in investing into CGDG for dividend growth. Now, one of its weakest components or strongest components, it's too early to say, is its exposure to European markets. Now, with the exception of last year, the US market has dominated in the last 10 years. Now, last year, European markets were doing pretty well. So, if European markets continue to do well, let's say in the next couple of years, and CGDG benefits from that, then yeah, it might be a good candidate to be a dividend growth king. But as of 2026, not yet. Okay, so let's look at how CGDG fits in my portfolio. Now, I think it's important to kind of figure out how these ETFs play a role in a portfolio. And for me, SCHD gives me that value exposure. CGDG gives me that international exposure. And HY is not an ETF, at least not what I'm looking at. It stands for high yield income ETFs. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then DGRO has some tech exposure. And by tech, I mean it has some exposure to companies like Apple and Microsoft because SCHD and CGDG aren't really tech heavy sectors, at least, funds like Microsoft and Apple. So I like these ETFs because they all play some kind of role. Now, going back to HY, for those of you who don't know, I haven't had a job in 4 years. I'm living in Asia. I'm doing geo arbitrage. I take projects every now and then for part time money. So I rely on high yield income ETFs to give me some income and then use that income to invest in funds like SCHD, CGDG, and DGRO. So that's the reason why I have income exposure in my dividend growth portfolio. Okay, so looking at portfolio goals for 2026 to wrap up the video. As of January 12th, I have about 750 shares of SCHD, and my goal for 2026 is to have 2,000 shares. So right now I'm about 37% of that goal. Now, for those of you who've been watching my videos in the past year, you'll know that at one point I had more than 5,000 shares of SCHD. But at that point, I felt like, gosh, maybe I'm putting too much in SCHD and I'm not diversifying enough. I tried to do a little bit more of other funds, but it just turned out that all my money was in SCHD and the other funds weren't balanced. So I decided to trim some of my shares out of SCHD and reallocate it to funds like CGDG and DGRO. Now, for CGDG, I also have 750 shares as of January 12th, and my goal for 2026 is to have 2,000 shares. Now, for DGRO, which is a more expensive fund because the share price is over $70 right now, I think it's going to be harder for me to reach 2,000 shares, but I'm going to still try. And so right now I'm about 37% of that goal. Now, this is part of my big 5-year plan. If we look at the first 2 years, I'm pretty close to reaching milestone 2, which is to reach 150K in principal. And I'm not talking about my high yield income funds or my geo arbitrage funds. I'm talking about 150K only in SCHD, CGDG, DGRO, and some of my funds in my Roth IRA account. Now, if we look at what I'm trying to do this year, by the end of 2027, I'm trying to hit that 250K principal, right? And in the next year after that, 2028, I'm hoping to reach 430K, which will be the first stage of what I call income escape velocity. And for others, they might call it coast fire, where I don't actually have to invest a lot of money into the fund because the dividend growth funds will generate enough dividends to start reinvesting big portions. Because right now, the dividends aren't really that big by itself. And that's why I'm using high yield income to help me put some of that income and buy a lot of shares while the share price is relatively low. Now, just to wrap up the video, I had been a slow and steady investor, things like DCAing and trying to use a lot of my own money to invest. But using that plan, I thought, man, it's going to take me 20 or more years to do this. So when high yield income funds came into the space, I thought maybe I could use some of these, income from high yield income funds to put in my dividend growth plays. And I'm not talking about like VOO or SPY. I'm talking about things that are really focused on dividend growth because I'm hoping to retire off of these funds by 2030. So if you're interested in following my journey, please like and subscribe to this channel. This is episode number 6 of my Dividend FastPass series. Hope you got some value out of this. And I also make other videos on how to achieve financial freedom, how to live in Asia, and just how to find peace in financial independence. So if that appeals to you, please like this video and subscribe to watch more free content on achieving financial freedom and living in Asia. Thanks again for watching this video, and you might also like these videos. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.